You ever notice how there's so many genres of video games that never seem to get any attention? Well, there's a good reason for that. There are a lot of video game genres that are obviously easy to watch. First person shooters and the like are pretty easy to pick up. And by that I mean a viewer can click on a stream or a video and keep track of what's going on. Instantly pick up on what's supposed to be happening and how the person in control is doing. But when you take something like a MOBA or a real-time strategy game, that gets significantly more complicated. People have to start typing in questions or looking things up on their own in order to follow along. And that can greatly hamper a video game's popularity. And it's a big deal because I don't think people are really giving content creators enough credit for what is and isn't popular. Word of mouth is of course great, but one of the better ways to tell how a game is doing successfully is how many people are actually watching it. Now, I myself complain about flavors of the week all the time, and will probably continue to do so. But even I understand that there's a reason why stuff like Call of Duty and Fortnite are some of the most watched games on the internet. And I can also understand the popularity and hype behind something like Kingdom Come Deliverance and the Final Fantasy VII Remake, Part 2. Regardless of how I feel about them personally, the fact of the matter is that they're easy to watch. And it's one of those things that I have to pay very, very close attention to. Sometimes it's not about whether people have heard of a game or if the game is interesting for me to play. It's, can I make this video game entertaining to watch? Is it easy to watch in the first place? And if it isn't, what can I do to make it easier to watch, easier to understand, and fun to digest? That's the sort of thing that streamers and video creators don't get enough credit for. Where a game developer fails, there are times where the creator themselves has to step up and fill in those gaps. And of course, depending on what you're playing or how creative you are, that can be pretty easy to do. I mean, I haven't actually put it into use, but just take a look at this Ace Combat footage. And I have some other ideas for some other games, but that's going to take a lot more time. But hopefully people are looking forward to them. Being a variety content creator has a lot of pros and a lot of cons, and the biggest con is there are a lot of genres that I'd like to get more into, like to spend more time with, but I understand that there's absolutely no place for them with your modern day viewer. And this isn't even a dig against people or their attention span. This is just, a lot of people are going to look at a game like this and turn their heads away from it. It's just not that appealing visually. So that's where stuff like editing in sound effects, cutaways, and things like that come into play. But even that is only going to get you so far. I think that the three biggest genres that suffer from this issue are real-time strategy games, where the UI is typically way too small and there are too many things on screen as far as like the various units that it can be very difficult for a viewer, even somebody who's been there since the very beginning, to keep up. Then there's fighting games. Fighting games are easier to pay attention to because you have the health bar. I mean, obviously you just have to keep an eye out for whose health bar is bigger, and as long as the streamer has health, then you know that they're okay. But fighting games are very mechanically complex, and a viewer isn't going to immediately understand the significance of all of the different movements and animations that are playing out on the screen. There are also a ton of fighting game terms depending on what game is being played. So, fighting games don't just have a barrier to entry for playing them, but they also have that barrier to entry for viewers. It can still be very exciting if the stream has high energy and maybe have somebody who can vocalize what's going on in a very clear way. But more often than not, that's just not going to happen with everyone. Fighting games are also very skill intensive, which means that the streamer or the person who's recording the video isn't going to have time to address everything. Sometimes they have to lock in and get really focused, and that means that they're less engaging. And from what a lot of people have been telling me, when it comes to live streaming at the very least, engagement is one of the things that they look forward to the most as a viewer. So to lose out on that on a game that requires your skill and your attention, it's a big ask. The last game genre that suffers from difficult viewership is definitely MMOs. I love MMORPGs, or at least I used to. But they've always had this problem when I'm looking for a new one, is I'll go see who's streaming and what the gameplay looks like, not the fancy cinematic trailers that they show you. And the problem with MMOs is that the user interface is almost always all over the screen. Health bars, items, skills. The usable amount of screen space that is actually for the game itself is like 25%. Everything else is UI, and as much as I'd like to sit here and say that it's unnecessary and that those UI elements can be turned off, the other part of me understands that there's got to be a reason why so many people leave them on all the time. That sort of thing makes the visual overload incredibly high. And not only does it create an experience that I don't want to watch, it also discourages me from wanting to play games like that. I don't want my screen to be filled with nothing but menus, inventories, and all of that stuff. I'd like to see more of the game than anything else. And that's partially why first-person shooters, third-person shooters, single-player RPGs and stuff like that are so easy for people to watch. If you take a look at a screenshot from an MMO, or an MMO streamer, whatever, you can see that there is a whole lot going on, and not enough of it is video games. Compare that to, we won't even use Escape from Tarkov because that game is basically HUDless. Let's compare it to Battlefield, or even Call of Duty. You can immediately see the difference. Screen real estate is incredibly important, and the more of that gets dedicated to the game itself, the better it is for viewers to actually watch the game. Now, a lot of people will argue that the viewers are there to watch the streamer and not the game. And to an extent, I agree with that, but only to an extent. There are plenty of streamers who get away with just talking, but there are a lot of people who have to have a game going in the background. Ask yourself honestly, what game or what type of game would you rather have your streamer playing? Do you want one that looks like a hot mess, or do you want something that is at the very least digestible. Let me know what you think about it down in the comments below. What video game genre is the hardest to watch, and what game genre do you think is the easiest to watch? Let's have a discussion about it. That's going to do it for me. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in another video.